Caesar was a master of theatrics, both political and otherwise. On February 15th, 44 BC, precisely 1 month before his death, he was at the height of his powers, overseeing the ancient Lupercalia festival from a throne-like golden chair and dressed in the purple robes and red leather boots of the old Alban kings from which he claimed descent. Only 1 day earlier, he had been declared Dictator Perpetuo, the first time that this emergency office of absolute power had been allowed to exist with no clear end date in sight. His ascent to that gilded chair in the Forum had been made possible through the use of pomp and spectacle that both enraptured the people of Rome and solidified his base of support within the elite oligarchy. As a young man, he rose to prominence by publicly defying Sulla when all else cowed before him. He built on this credibility and his family connection to Marius to unveil statues of the great man throughout the city, to the roaring approval of the crowd, but the disapproval of the optimates Sulla had empowered. He would establish himself as a filial Julian and devoted husband with stunning funeral orations for his aunt Julia and his first wife, Cornelia. Both of these were unprecedented in scope and lavishness, as funerals for women, even among aristocrats, tended to be muted affairs, and no woman as young as Cornelia had ever been honored with a public funeral oration. As aedile, he would hold gladiatorial games of unrivaled splendor, with fighters outfitted in gold and silver armor that dazzled the crowd. He would contract so many fighters for his games that the Senate worried he was surreptitiously bringing an army into the city to foment a popular coup. Whether motivated by fear of an uprising, or future aediles were worried about how to possibly upstage Caesar, legislation would soon be passed that limited the size of gladiatorial games. Decades later, when he celebrated an unprecedented 4 successive triumphs, Caesar was free to disregard these laws, and he was sure to provide entertainment on a scale that befitted the pure spectacle and theater of his triumphs. It was his uncanny ability to please the urban poor with both style and substance that led to his popularity with the masses, be they the enlisted man in his legions or the dispossessed farmer looking for work in Rome. While other politicians would finance public works and shower war booty on the city during triumphs, Caesar alone possessed a drive to alter the very foundations of the Roman state. Juvenal said that nothing mattered to the plebs but bread and circuses. Caesar provided both. This ability to consistently placate the masses is a testament to the political genius of Caesar and the meticulous planning that went into all of his public actions. However, he was only human and made several political missteps during his career, such as the attempt to imprison Cato during his consulship. But these all seem like impulsive decisions, and given time to plan ahead, Caesar had an unrivaled knack for choreographing his actions to ensure the desired outcome. It's ironic, then, that perhaps the only time when a public spectacle misfired, he would embolden his foes to the point that Caesar would pay with his life. The festival of the Lupercalia on February 15th is one of the most fascinating events in the Roman religious calendar. Purporting to date back to Romulus and Remus, the festival is chock full of archaic elements and bizarre rituals that place its origins in the mythic past, surrounded by a cloud of mystery that even the Romans themselves could not fully comprehend. Our degree of separation from the world of the Romans makes the real origins of the festival utterly unknowable, and it drives home just how incomprehensible the world of the ancients is to our own modern minds. For hundreds of years, the youths of 2 specific aristocratic families would gather in a cave at the base of the Palatine Hill, which legend held to be the site where Romulus and Remus had been found and nursed by the she-wolf. Inside the cave was a cult altar at which a male goat and a dog were sacrificed, alongside an offering of salted meal cakes that had been prepared by the Vestal Virgins. One participant from each of the families would then be anointed with blood directly from the sacrificial knife, after which they were wiped clean with wool soaked in milk, and once clean, they had to laugh to finish the ritual. The rite complete, all participating youths cut strips from the flayed skin of the animal and ran naked around the Palatine, striking women in the crowd with the leather strips, as it was believed to increase fertility. Here is how Plutarch describes the arcane ritual.
Many of the noble youths and of the magistrates run up and down through the city naked, for sport and laughter, striking those they meet with shaggy thongs. And many women of rank also purposely get in their way, and like children at school, present their hands to be struck, believing that the pregnant will thus be helped in delivery and the barren to pregnancy.
That tradition would be altered in 44 BC with the addition of a third aristocratic family, Caesar's own Julian clan, to the cave under the Palatine, a change to one of Rome's foundational religious traditions for which there was no precedent. Just one day earlier, Caesar had been declared dictator for life, and the inclusion of the Julians in the Lupercalia was a sign that Caesar might intend his position at the apex of Roman politics to benefit his clan well beyond his death. But it was not the inclusion of several young Julians in the cave rites that would make the Lupercalia of 44 BC the most memorable observance of the festival in its history. This day would prove to be momentous because of a grave miscalculation on Caesar's part, which would ultimately lead to his assassination. Mark Antony, in his position as chief priest of the Julian College, offered Caesar a crown, and Caesar said no. After completing the circuit, a half-naked Antony approached the rostra, where Caesar sat on a gilded chair that was a throne in all but name. In addition to the regal appearance created by the purple robe and high red shoes, sources also say that he was wearing a gold wreath, another honor which had been voted him by the Senate. But it does cause one to wonder why Antony felt the need to offer a crown to someone who was, for all intents and purposes, already not just wearing one, but exercising all the power that came with it. What happened next has come across differently in the surviving sources. All we know is that someone leaped up and placed a wreath with a royal diadem on Caesar's head, and Antony said, "The people offer this to you, through me." However, all sources do agree that Caesar instantly removed the wreath and turned to Lepidus for assistance. Gaius Cassius, a future assassin, took the crown from him and placed it in Caesar's lap, while the Tribune Casca, another future assassin, would join Cassius in urging Caesar to accept the crown. 3 times Caesar rejected the wreath, each time to louder and louder applause. But it is reported that by the 3rd attempt at crowning Caesar, some in the crowd shouted, "Hail, King!" Caesar felt that the point had been made and finally stood, removing the wreath and diadem from his head and tossing them from the rostra. He would declare then his opposition to monarchy, stating that a crown belonged only to Jupiter. The diadem was then taken to the temple on the Capitoline and gifted to the god himself. This shows that it was likely no mean crown which Caesar rejected, but was probably a fine piece of workmanship. Caesar would record the events of the day for the public as,
"To Gaius Caesar, perpetual dictator, Marcus Antonius the consul, by command of the people, offered the kingship. Caesar was unwilling."
While some debate if this was an impromptu outpouring of support from Antony or a choreographed effort, in my mind, there is no doubt that an individual as calculating as Caesar planned this display down to the last detail as part of his efforts to assuage the aristocracy that he would not claim monarchical rights or titles. Unlike his political rivals, Caesar was always politically astute enough to favor real power over symbolic power. Just look to the time when he passed on his own triumph to stand for the consulship. And at this point, he held all the power of a king. A series of events in the weeks prior had necessitated that Caesar demonstrate he did not aspire to monarchy. The most well-known was his refusal to rise and greet a party of senators that came to visit him as he oversaw construction in his new forum. But he also incurred senatorial outrage by deposing 2 optimate-backed tribunes that were investigating a series of incidents that appeared like spontaneous outpourings of grassroots support for Caesarian monarchy, including the placement of crowns on his statues across the city. Optimates believed that these were trial balloons meant to gauge public opinion. Caesar felt that they were false flags, meant to paint his supporters as closet monarchists. In my view, Caesar did not desire a crown, now that he was already dictator for life, and if he ever hoped to assume the title, perhaps for dealing with foreign potentates as a man of equal pedigree, he would have made that decision on the basis of political expediency alone, not a lust for glory. If he had been planning to make the Lupercalia the stunning culmination of decades of political maneuvering, it is doubtful he would have selected the borderline orgiastic atmosphere of the Lupercalia and a half-naked Antony to mark his ascension to the monarchy. However, the decision to publicly reject monarchy and hopefully placate the grumbling remnants of the Optimate faction ended up having the opposite effect. Cicero reports that this event would convince a faction of the Senate that immediate action had to be taken to remove Caesar. This is certainly how the events of the Lupercalia are portrayed in Shakespeare's famous Julius Caesar. And a year after the assassination, Cicero would even go as far as to say that Antony was Caesar's real murderer for exposing him to the aristocratic outrage for the attempted coronation. In the wake of the Lupercalia, Caesar's enemies circulated the tale that in seeking a crown, Caesar had been rebuffed by the people. Because of some confusion in the sources, some scholars still maintain this view. But in my opinion, this is likely not what happened on that fateful February day. Had Caesar truly been cowed by the mob, there would have been no impetus to organize the plot to take his life. Rather, it's likely that the shouts of Rex were authentic, and the conspirators understood that Caesar really could ascend to kinghood with popular support, anytime he chose. Caesar's attempt to show his aversion to monarchy had been undermined by the real and authentic support that the urban poor had for the dictator. Regardless of what really happened on that February day, Caesar would be dead just 1 month later, undone not just by the men he was trying to win over by rejecting monarchy, but by dear friends like Casca, Cassius, and Brutus. Ironically, the assassination would demonstrate that it was untenable to rule Rome as anything less than an absolute monarch, and would pave the way for Caesar's heir Augustus to deliver the death knell to the Republic.